If there's one thing Gravity Falls is truly exceptional at, it is taking joke characters and giving them depth. Gravity Falls is a funny show. It is a show that has a lot of one-off episodes, a lot of quite amusing joke characters. It has as much DNA in common with The Simpsons as it does with anime, as creator Alex Hirsch would readily admit, and has readily admitted. To add depth to those joke characters, to make them dramatically functional while still keeping them funny, is a difficult task, and it is one I think this show is exceptionally good at. My all-time favorite example of this is Pacifica, who is introduced simply as this blonde bully stereotype to contrast with Mabel's dorky, sincere earnestness. But over time, Pacifica changes. She starts to open up a bit more to the kids, and the kids start to learn a bit more about her, leading to her story becoming more nuanced. We see the influences she is under. We see the expectations that burden her. And we see her fighting, however imperfectly, against those expectations. She becomes a real person, not simply a caricature. Something similar happens to Fiddleford McGucket, a silly character with a silly name. That sounds like something Dickens would have come up with. And he is a joke. He is this crazy old man who is also this brilliant inventor. That's funny. It's funny that he's this over-the-top stereotype of a hillbilly, and yet at the same time, he also has the capacity to make all these wild, often terrifying inventions. That's funny, and it's a good joke. But it's just a joke. In Season 2, the show adds more depth to this character. We see what made him as he is. We see that he was Ford's apprentice, and he actually had a good life in California before he came to help Ford back in the 1980s, working in what was becoming Silicon Valley. Which is funny, but it also demonstrates that he is a very smart person who probably would have become quite wealthy and successful had his life continued without Ford. But he does join Ford to research the weird and the strange and the grotesquely otherworldly. All sorts of Lovecraftian horrors lurking beyond the void. And as a result, he is deeply traumatized. He sees what is in Ford's portal and decides he can't do it anymore. He leaves the experimental lab entirely and tries to make himself forget what he saw, leading to the invention of the Society of the Blind Eye, where he takes these contraptions and uses them to erase his memories, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind style. And eventually, this process has negative side effects when repeated often enough, transforming him into this hillbilly figure we see in Gravity Falls. I really appreciate how all this information is relayed. We get the tape that has all the secrets from McGucket's log, and they watch it and learn, which doesn't sound like it would be a particularly cinematic moment, but it is. I've always been quite drawn to scenes in visual media where characters sit down and watch something. We are watching them watch something. In a way, they are our fellow viewers. And it builds this rather interesting sense of camaraderie between us and the characters. especially when it is played correctly and the character's reactions enhance the experience of the audience instead of either undermining it or being way too obvious about what the audience is supposed to feel. My all-time favorite example of this is in Cowboy Bebop, where they sit down and watch the old tape of Faye, back when she was a happy, cheerful child, optimistic about the future instead of a jaded, cynical adult who has suffered greatly. And the characters in Cowboy Bebop are prepared to kind of playfully make fun of her, tease her a bit, but once they start seeing it, they can't really do that. They are genuinely moved. They sense that there's a real tragedy to that, and they share that experience with Faye and with the audience. What we see with McGucket isn't quite on that same level of emotional poignancy, but it works for the same reason. We see someone's decline through the eyes of someone who is learning about that decline themselves because they have forgotten it, just as Faye forgot her own past. And it's interesting to consider the implications of this. Technology is McGucket's greatest asset. It is what defines him as a person, going all the way back to his early days in Silicon Valley to the present in Gravity Falls. He is someone who adores contraptions and building crazy things left and right. But ultimately, technology is his downfall. He creates the contraptions that lead to him being deeply unsettled and unraveling. And when that happens to him, he creates another contraption to erase the memories created by his other contraptions, and the secondary contraption that erases the memories leads to him devolving into this eccentric hillbilly. I think about Heidegger's The Question Concerning Technology, where Heidegger is very astute to say that technology fundamentally changes our relationship with the natural world, and it is foolish to assume that it doesn't. That it's simply this neutral force that can be wielded for good or ill, depending on who uses it, which is a line that is still quite bandied about these days, that, oh, it's not good or bad, it just depends on who uses it. Well, Heidegger says it's not good or bad, but it's also not neutral. It fundamentally shifts our relationship with the world. If we're traveling, say, by foot, and then we're traveling by train or by jet plane, that fundamentally changes how we interact with the world. It is not simply, oh, it's easier and more efficient to get to where we're going. The fundamental character of our relationship with the environment is changed. We are removed by at least a few steps from that direct natural experience with our environment, and instead we see it in this instrumentalized kind of way, as something that we use tools in order to navigate in a way that is the most efficient and comfortable way possible. The same is true going from, say, cooking something out on an open fire to cooking it in a modern stove or oven. The question is not just it's the same as what was being done, but easier and better. It's a fundamental denaturing of how we experience the world. We are going away from this very intense, very specific, very clear perception of what's happening to something that is hidden behind the operations of technology. We simply pop something in the oven, wait however many minutes, and then take it out. What is fundamentally happening, the essence of that experience, is hidden from us. It is hidden from how we actually experience the world. We simply experience that heating process as something mechanistic, something that we just accept instead of something that we see ourselves. Gravity Falls, I think, has a somewhat similar view. It is a show that is fundamentally against taking shortcuts. When you simply rely on technology to do something for you, you are denatured. You are removed from the actual experience itself, and there is a deep loss in that. This is what Mabel ultimately comes to as a conclusion in that episode, when she decides that, yes, her memories of that summer of failed relationships is bad, but she has to actually deal with it. And the consequences of just trying to erase it simply from her mind are significantly worse. More or less the same conclusion that we get from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So, we have McGucket, who goes basically to two extremes. While his character is deeply sympathetic and tragic, the show does not condone what he does. He wants so badly to know, to learn, to discover. And then when he does, he is so terrified that he wants to simply erase it all. And he goes to great technological lengths in order to achieve that end. And that ends up being destructive too. Gravity Falls is a show that has a basic hermeneutic that knowing is good. Trying to learn more about the world is a good thing. That sounds basic, but I really want to emphasize that this is fundamentally essential to how the show operates. It is a show about Dipper going out and wanting to know things. Wanting to know who the author is, what are the mysteries of this town, and trying to figure those out by himself. And the show is more or less sympathetic to him and endorses that goal. But it also shows, through Ford's megalomania, his deep obsession with knowledge above all else, above personal relationships, above any sense of balance or caution, leading to him being tricked by Bill and ending up deeply isolated, and especially through the character of McGucket, whose life is ultimately destroyed by this single-minded pursuit of knowledge, that pursuit needs to be balanced with other things. It needs to be balanced with a sense of care and caution. It needs to be balanced with a sense of considering one's relationships with other people and with the natural environment. Knowledge is good, but it is not the only good. And these different goods, which are inevitably, to a certain degree, in conflict, need to be balanced in order to attain a fully healthy worldview. This is something that the British Victorian writer Matthew Arnold was very good on. So McGucket is tragic and a kind of cautionary tale. The Society of the Blind Eye is far from being cartoonish villains like we see quite a few times in the show, something deeply sympathetic. These are people who really want to just live in blissful ignorance. McGucket has seen worse than a lot of them, but at the same time, he was also the one who started this and chose the process and was the most affected by it. They're all complicit in some way. It's an interesting way to, going back to that idea of adding depth to jokes, transform the idea of, oh, these people are idiots who have no idea that they live in a magical town, to the much more interesting idea of course they know they live in a magical town to a certain extent in their limited ways, but they prefer not to. They prefer to just erase their memories. And that erasure process leaves them rather dotty, which the show very much understands but doesn't endorse. Dipper is someone who is very desperate to know, almost to a fault, and doesn't consider the other consequences of that single-minded pursuit of knowing. Mabel, conversely, is someone who, despite her cheerfulness, has an uncertain view about the future and wants to forget a lot of things. Just wants everything to be easier. We see this all the way into her bubble episode at the end of the show. And McGucket fundamentally contains both of those tendencies in himself. The desperate desire to know everything, regardless of the cost, and then the backlash from that, wanting simply to erase all the memories. And the show warns against both of those extremes in a way I think it's quite interesting. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos just like this one before anyone else. Keep watching Gravity Falls. It's a great and a really fascinating show. I love watching and discovering new things about. Adios, comrades.